It took 2 years to complete the painting, who wanted a portrait of the Princess of Wales for Cardiff City Hall. Before going to its permanent home, it'll take pride of place welcome from the public, as it did from the Princess.
For 25 years, one of royal history's most iconic portraits remained hidden inside Windsor Castle. Behind palace walls, a quiet struggle unfolded over Diana's legacy and her rightful place among the women who shaped the monarchy. Then, Princess Anne and Prince William reportedly joined forces to restore her portrait beside Queen Elizabeth, sending shockwaves through the royal family. But the painting's return was only part of the story. What truly stunned the palace was Anne's unexpected message to Camilla, a deeply personal confrontation that reportedly left the family shaken and reignited public debate over Diana's lasting place in royal history. The hidden portrait's secret. For a quarter of a century, an official portrait of Princess Diana remained tucked away in the shadows of Windsor Castle, unseen by the public and absent from the royal family's most sacred spaces. This painting was not just any image. It was created during one of Diana's brightest moments, when her warmth, beauty, and extraordinary ability to connect with people were at their peak. Those closest to her recall the silence that fell when Diana first saw the finished piece, a silence filled with the weight of recognition and unexpected truth. The portrait's intended place was the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor, a ceremonial gallery honoring the women who shaped the monarchy's history. Yet, Diana never saw it displayed there. After her tragic death in 1997, the portrait was quietly removed from consideration, wrapped carefully, and carried off into storage, where it would spend the next 2 decades hidden from view.
We have reports from Paris that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident. They were apparently being pursued by paparazzi on 2 motorcycles.
While the world outside continued to celebrate Diana's legacy, on magazine covers, stamp collections, and countless biographies inside palace walls, her image was slowly erased. In the immediate hours following Diana's death, royal insiders reveal a different reality from the public mourning outside the gates. Instead of calls of sorrow, the palace corridors buzzed with questions about Diana's possessions and crown jewels, signs of a scramble for control rather than grieving. This chaos set the stage for what would unfold inside those walls, a deliberate campaign to reorganize the spaces Diana once occupied. Diana's image and personal effects faded from prominent spots gradually and without fanfare. Frames moved subtly from public galleries to less visible corridors until, by the time most noticed, the evidence was gone. This slow erasure was strategic, designed to erase her physical presence without provoking open conflict or widespread objection. It was a disappearance so complete that her name was missing from the very wall meant to honor the monarchy's influential women. This absence was glaring. The Hall of Matriarchs stood with a gap where Diana's portrait rightfully should have hung, like an empty space so obvious that visiting dignitaries, political leaders, and family members all noticed it in one way or another. For her sons, William and Harry, every family gathering kept circling back to that same missing piece, a quiet, painful symbol of something that had been taken, but also quietly hidden. Still, what exactly caused the removal stayed tucked inside palace politics and personal rivalries, almost as if it was never meant to surface. That missing portrait came to mean more than just a display problem. It turned into a deeper tension, a silent legacy clash between what happened before and the ones who wanted to rewrite it. Diana's ties to the monarchy were massive, yet her presence also caused an undeniable discomfort inside certain palace circles. The way people talked about the portrait, it doesn't read like a simple matter of picture-hanging protocol. It hints at old wounds and resentments that ran deeper than decor decisions. This concealment laid bare a question that kept haunting the family. How does a woman once so beloved simply vanish from the history she helped shape? The mystery around the portrait's absence became this broad symbol of erasure, like a story of power being used in a careful, low voice behind closed doors. And the full truth? Well, it was still not out yet, not fully, something that would only emerge in a confrontation that had been brewing for decades, patiently delayed. Behind that silence, a plan was quietly growing. A sort of determination to undo the years of erasure and bring Diana's rightful place back into view was taking form, a plan made with patience and precision, not haste. The ones who felt the loss most sharply were waiting, almost still as stone, for the moment to step forward. They knew the time to reclaim her memory was moving closer. The hidden portrait's years in darkness would soon be over. But when that happened, it would trigger a confrontation that rippled through the royal family in ways nobody could have predicted. The determination to restore Diana's presence was tied deeply to the complex and often tense role Camilla played in the palace story. Camilla's quiet erasure. Camilla's ascent into the royal family was marked by years of secrecy, opposition, and a shadow cast long before she was publicly acknowledged. Known during Diana's life as the secret woman behind Charles, Camilla was the subject of Diana's private scrutiny and pointed nicknames, symbolizing the fracture within the marriage. After Diana's death, Camilla's influence within the palace strengthened, but so did her controversial legacy. From the moment Diana died, Camilla began to move decisively into spaces once marked by Diana's presence. Yet, her approach was not that of a newcomer simply settling in. Instead, it was a calculated erasure. Personal touches that Diana had cherished, like fresh flowers, were ordered removed and destroyed. This act of burning, rather than replacing, was a stark signal, understood clearly by staff as more than just decoration. It was a message of exclusion. The bedroom Diana had slept in, a room full of memories and intimacy, was locked down permanently at Camilla's behest, not for her own use, but to ensure no one else would find comfort or refuge there either. This sealing of space spoke volumes about how Diana's memory was treated as something to be hidden away rather than honored. Diana's belongings were boxed and relocated, while her image retreated from royal halls in a gradual, almost invisible campaign. The slow removal, piece by piece, evaded direct challenge by making each loss seem minor on its own. Yet collectively, these moves amounted to an erasure. No formal announcement was made, no explicit decree given. Instead, the absence was normalized through omission. This low-key campaign kinda culminated in Diana's portrait, never reaching the Hall of Matriarchs, a wall kept for the monarchy's influential women. For more than 2 decades, the empty patch where Diana's face belonged stayed there, like a quiet seal on what had been taken, and also on who had arranged that taking. Heads of state and family members, they passed by too, but without any real acknowledgement of that obvious, staring omission. Camilla's dominance in the palace had rearranged not only the physical spaces, but the story itself. Her presence imposed a different regime where Diana's legacy got minimized and shoved to the side. Still, under all that, the setup fed resentment, mostly among people who remembered the actual truth behind the family's fractured timeline. As Camilla's authority expanded, the invisible barriers did too. Tight smiles that weren't warm, words held back, and those unspoken tensions that marked her relationship with other family members, especially Princess Anne. In the palace's stiff, almost theatrical social hierarchy, Camilla wielded power quietly, but with good results, steering not just rooms but also memories. Her 90-minute absence during the night Diana's portrait was returned wasn't just a coincidence. It looked like a deliberate exclusion, the kind that signals how much she was kept out of the process and, ultimately, kept out of the family's choice to publicly reconcile Diana's place. The carefully managed silence around that night highlighted, quite bluntly, how power can move without fanfare. This slow erasure basically set the stage for a reckoning that had been brewing for ages, a reckoning driven by people who simply weren't willing to let Diana's memory be diminished any longer. At the heart of this reckoning was William, whose own journey would reveal long-hidden wounds and a quiet determination to restore justice. William's silent promise. At just 15 years old, Prince William walked behind his mother's coffin in a moment that stunned the world. But behind the public grief was a deeper understanding of the turmoil that had shaped Diana's final years. He knew about the breakdown of his parents' marriage and the painful reality Diana had famously described as 3 people in the marriage. While millions mourned the loss of a princess, William was mourning a mother whose struggles he had witnessed firsthand. The years after Diana's death only deepened those wounds. Questions surrounding her final fears, including a controversial letter she wrote in 1995 expressing concerns for her safety, became part of the family's complicated history. For William, these stories were not distant headlines, but deeply personal reminders of a tragedy that would influence him for the rest of his life. As he grew older, William watched the royal family evolve, while memories of Diana seemed to fade from some corners of palace life. Portraits disappeared, traditions changed, and the presence of those who had once been central to Diana's story became increasingly prominent. Publicly, William remained composed, rarely revealing his emotions. Privately, however, he carried a determination to ensure that his mother's legacy would never be forgotten. Unlike Prince Harry, who often chose to speak openly about family tensions, William pursued a quieter path. He learned how the institution worked from the inside, understanding that lasting change would require patience rather than confrontation. Over time, he built the influence needed to shape the monarchy's future while protecting the memory of the woman who had inspired millions. His efforts were careful and deliberate, like pretty measured. Instead of moving on a sudden impulse, William kept things inside royal customs and set procedures. So every step taken to honor Diana would be permanent, hard to undo, really. Each decision, it felt like, held a long-range plan, not some quick emotional snap. When Diana's portrait was eventually restored to its rightful place, that moment was more than simply putting a painting back. It stood for the completion of a promise William had carried since childhood, a promise that he would safeguard his mother's place in royal history and make sure her contributions would never get erased. For William, it was mostly about dignity, remembrance, and something close to justice. For the monarchy, it suggested a shift toward admitting the lasting influence Diana left on the institution. Even decades after her death, her legacy stayed a strong force, and William's insistence helped ensure it would keep shaping the royal family for generations to come. Even as this long-awaited restoration unfolded, another key figure was preparing to make an unexpected and historic intervention inside the palace walls. Anne's powerful resolve. Princess Anne's role in this story runs deeper than many realize, rooted in a lifetime of loyalty, sacrifice, and simmering resentment. Before Camilla became part of the royal picture, there was a profound connection between Anne and Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's former husband. Their relationship was serious enough to consider marriage, but the royal family and religious constraints intervened, shutting down the possibility. Andrew's Catholic faith prevented Anne, a senior figure in the Church of England, from marrying him, leading her to step aside quietly. Anne's sacrifice was emblematic of her entire life. She repeatedly put the institution before herself, following demands she had little choice but to accept. Shortly after Anne's withdrawal, Camilla entered the scene, and Andrew soon proposed to her. Anne attended their wedding in 1973, sitting in the pews, fully aware of what she had lost. Her composed exterior masked the depth of personal pain engendered by watching the man she had hoped to marry join another woman. This quiet suffering shaped Anne's guarded demeanor and her approach to palace life. She is known for not making scenes or airing grievances publicly, but her silence carries weight. The tension between Anne and Camilla has been palpable for decades, with royal insiders describing a coldness so precise it never crosses the line into open hostility, yet is unmistakably there. Anne's icy aloofness is not just personal animosity. It is a silent resistance to someone she never accepted. Over the years, Anne never bowed to Camilla, reportedly even receiving explicit permission from Queen Elizabeth to forego that traditional show of respect. Anne's refusal to grant such gestures symbolizes a clear boundary. She acknowledges Camilla as the king's wife, but not as the queen in her own right. This boundary reflects the ongoing fracture between these two women who share a complex and painful history entwined with the fate of the monarchy. Anne witnessed firsthand how Diana was not only eroded in life, but erased after her death. She saw portraits disappear, rooms locked, and personal items stored away, each act another stitch in the fabric of forgetting Diana within these walls. Anne bore these changes silently, carrying a deep sense of injustice with the quiet endurance she is known for. Her steadfast opposition to Camilla signals a rare but powerful alliance when her motives kind of mesh up with William's. Both are tethered by loyalty to Diana's memory, yet also by personal scars that Camilla's presence and her choices left behind. That same determination kept running for decades, not only as a way to remember Diana, but to reclaim her place. one that Camilla had really tried to sand down and erase bit by bit. Anne's reputation as a woman who never says what she thinks only makes the impact sharper when she finally does. Her careful, understated resistance is a real force inside the palace, and Camilla reportedly finds it extra unsettling. At times, it turns into this silent contest of social signals, proper seating at dinners, quiet hellos, and that kind of withheld family warmth that you feel but can't quite name. In May 2023, after the coronation, Anne confronted Camilla privately, and she told her straight, "You are not the queen, you are the king's wife."
That there was a coronation dinner, which obviously the king and Camilla was there, and apparently the Princess Royal, I don't know if you heard this one, the Princess Royal said, "You're not queen, you're the queen's consort."
Those 5 words seemed to carry beyond the room, meaning Anne's disregard for protocol was not some impulse. It came from deep conviction and a long stack of unresolved grievances. Moments like this show the invisible yet fierce fight Anne has been waging. Anne's resolve also gave crucial support to William's carefully arranged plan to bring Diana's presence back, adding the weight of history and family to what was still unfolding. Their plan came to life on a night marked by silence, precision, and decades of pent-up demands and unspoken truths. The night Diana returned. The night Diana's portrait was returned to the Hall of Matriarchs was the culmination of decades of planning and silent defiance. William had meticulously prepared every step, consulting curators, studying royal precedent, and ensuring that all legal and institutional requirements were met. His attention to detail was designed to create an action so solid no one could challenge or reverse it once the portrait was hung. Even so, Princess Anne's decision to attend and oversee the placement personally was not part of William's original plan. While protocol allowed the curators to handle the work, Anne insisted on being there, determined to witness the moment herself after 50 years of watching from the sidelines. Her presence added a layer of personal significance to the event, transforming it from a simple restoration into a heartfelt family statement. The portrait had spent more than 20 years wrapped in protective coverings, a symbol of absence and loss. Staff describing that evening emphasized their careful, deliberate movements, handling the painting with the respect owed to something that had already suffered. The slow unveiling was not just practical but deeply symbolic, almost as if offering Diana a long overdue homecoming. Anne, who had followed Diana's life and struggles closely, stood mere feet from the portrait's reveal. She wasn't seeing the public icon, but a young woman she had quietly watched endure personal and institutional destruction. This intimate perspective turned the moment into a deeply emotional vigil, where history, family, and justice converged visually and spiritually. The framing was precise, the positioning deliberate. On this prestigious wall, every inch and every placement matters enormously. Within an hour and a half, Diana's portrait hung directly beside Queen Elizabeth, the 2 women who defined the emotional heart of the monarchy standing side by side at last. This pairing was a powerful symbol of continuity, loss, and eventual recognition. The room grew silent after the portrait was hung. No applause, no speeches, just a quiet shared acknowledgement. Then Princess Anne broke the silence with a simple, profound statement that reverberated through the empty gallery. "Diana belongs here, and she always did." Those words, stripped of ceremony or explanation, carried the weight of 25 years of omission and pain. That day, the painting was more than art. It was a restoration of respect and place, a correction of a long-standing wrong. The absence of grand proclamations only highlighted the profound truth finally spoken aloud by a woman known for her measured words and restrained power. Anne's statement reasserted Diana's presence and rightful place without embellishment or controversy. For those who understood the full history behind the portrait's disappearance, its return was a powerful act of justice. It was a reminder that public memory and family legacy are subject to the dynamics of power, but also to the resilience of those who refuse to let history be rewritten or erased. This night marked a turning point, a reclaiming of identity and dignity, long denied. While Diana's face returned to the palace walls, the ripples of that act were felt far beyond. signaling a new chapter in how her memory would be honored and how her story would be told. The shockwaves from Diana's return resonated deeply, shaking the foundations of the family and challenging those who presumed control. Camilla's shocked reaction. Camilla had spent years quietly reshaping the palace around herself, confident in her position as the king's wife and the woman who had outlasted decades of opposition. So, when Diana's portrait reappeared on the Hall of Matriarchs wall beside Queen Elizabeth, her reaction was swift and visceral. By all accounts, she was completely gobsmacked, stunned to see the woman she had long tried to erase returned with so much finality and ceremony. Without delay, Camilla sought out King Charles, expecting him to take immediate action. She demanded that the portrait be taken down at once, a direct challenge within the very walls she had helped control for so long. Yet what followed was a shock even greater than the portrait's return. Charles said nothing. He refused to intervene, to reverse the move, or even to offer support. This refusal left Camilla powerless, a position she had never experienced before. Throughout her royal tenure, her preferences became policies. Rooms were locked or opened, flowers burned or replaced, and portraits removed or displayed often at her behest. To suddenly face a palace that would not obey her demands must have been disorienting and humiliating. Her subsequent orders to palace staff were met with firm refusals. The emergency meetings she called did not materialize, and when she sought the names of those involved in restoring Diana's portrait, she was stonewalled. Instead of regaining control, Camilla found herself isolated and ignored, a queen without command in her own household. Witnesses described her as rigid with fury, standing in corridors alone, unable to compose herself as the situation slipped beyond her grasp. This physical manifestation of shock revealed the depth of the blow, not just to her authority, but to her carefully maintained narrative within the family. It was a moment of profound reckoning. The fact that Camilla was excluded from the proceedings, from the planning to the execution, only intensified her sense of defeat. She had been scheduled away on an engagement outside London, placed strategically to keep her from interfering, as if everything was already mapped. The palace moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed plan, leaving no room for surprise or opposition, none at all. Charles's silence was a decisive act. He had spent decades fighting alongside Camilla, defending her against critics, the press, and even his own sons. But then, when he was confronted face-to-face with his son's unyielding restoration of Diana's legacy, he chose institutional stability over marital loyalty. That choice sent a clear message, inside and beyond the palace walls, whether anyone liked it or not. The king's refusal to act was perhaps the most devastating aspect of the day for Camilla, a personal and political defeat wrapped up together like one heavy package. It revealed a fracture in the family alliances that would start reshaping palace dynamics going forward, almost immediately. This wasn't just a loss for Camilla. It was a rebalancing of authority that could not be undone later. While Camilla grappled with her new reality, the weight of decades spent chipping away at Diana's legacy came crashing down. At the same time, the woman she had once eclipsed was now visibly and institutionally honored. That shift in power within the family set the stage for a much larger reckoning affecting the monarchy itself. A family reckoning. The return of Diana's portrait was more than a symbolic gesture. It heralded a profound realignment of influence within the royal family. What had once been a subtle erasure had now become an institutional restoration, sending ripples through every corner of the monarchy. Those who had held power quietly felt that power wane, while others found renewed strength in Diana's enduring legacy. One of the hallmarks of this reckoning was the reactivation of Diana's royal patronages. These formal links between the monarchy and charities were never mere decorations. They reflected Diana's genuine passion, especially for hospices, landmine victims, and AIDS wards during times when such causes were stigmatized. The shift of these patronages back under Catherine's oversight signaled a reclaiming of Diana's humanitarian contributions. This revival was not limited to titles and ceremonies. It showed up in the royal family's official communications, where Diana's name was mentioned more in the 2 weeks after the portrait's unveiling than it had been in the preceding 2 years combined. Such frequency was a clear, deliberate signal of renewed respect and prioritization. Behind this change was a palpable shift in daily palace life. Staff and family alike absorbed the message that the balance of power was moving, subtle yet unmistakable. Everyone on the royal payroll understood that the household's priorities were evolving and that some long-standing footholds were evaporating. William's ongoing personal resentment toward Camilla, held with quiet discipline for decades, underpinned much of this transition. While Harry expressed his grievances openly through memoirs and public statements, William chose patience and strategy, using institutional knowledge to effect lasting change rather than immediate confrontation. Charles made private appeals to William not to marginalize Camilla after his passing, and honestly, it showed how messy and complicated this family thing really was. He could feel the weight of his son's emotions and how hard it is to keep everything calm, at least on the surface. Still, when the moment finally arrived, the king accepted the inevitable reckoning, let his son's choices stand, as if that too counted as a quiet pivot in where his loyalties were headed. And once that happened, well, it basically opened the door to a redefinition of Camilla's role. She was quietly removed from upcoming engagements, and she started fading from the center of power. It wasn't announced like some grand decree, more like changes that slipped in a step at a time, without the usual fanfare. The palace culture, you could see it, talks in subtle silences and the absences that follow, like everyone is pretending not to notice. As the shift kept unfolding, the monarchy had to face the hard truth that the unresolved wounds from older betrayals were now steering what came next. The emotional center of the family, the legacy of Diana, wasn't just pushed aside anymore. It started reclaiming space, right back at the core of what royal identity is supposed to mean. In the end, this family reckoning reshaped the monarchy's public face, and the private one too, reinforcing a blunt idea. Some histories can't be erased without consequence, and respect, once withheld, will eventually demand reparation, even if it arrives slowly. The restoration of Diana's legacy did not close the chapter. It opened the doors for a broader transformation that redefined the monarchy's future. Legacy reclaimed. The return of Diana's portrait to the Hall of Matriarchs symbolized more than recognition. It represented the restoration of a legacy that many believed had been pushed aside for years. Diana's charitable work and humanitarian values began receiving renewed attention, with Catherine helping continue causes closely associated with the late princess.
Kate is widely acknowledged as the perfect Princess of Wales. It is clear that Kate's own journey has been influenced by the mother-in-law she never met.
This signaled that Diana's influence was once again becoming part of the monarchy's modern identity, rather than simply a chapter of its past. The shift was visible not only through symbolism, but also through the palace's public messaging. Diana's name began appearing more frequently in official communications, reinforcing her importance to both royal history and the institution's future. For many observers, it suggested a deliberate effort to place her contributions back at the center of the royal narrative. Prince William's part in this transformation has been pretty huge. Significant. But unlike the more open, almost loud approach taken by Prince Harry, William has mostly worked inside the system quietly, making sure that his mother's legacy stays protected and framed the right way. The renewed visibility of Diana's image and the causes she stood for seems to come from both a personal dedication and a wider idea for where the monarchy is going next. At the same time, these changing priorities have kept rumors moving along about changing power dynamics within the royal family. As Diana's influence keeps expanding in public memory, people naturally start wondering how other senior figures fit into this shifting story, and what role they really play. It's like the narrative is adjusting in real time, even if nobody says it plainly. Most importantly, this renewed attention feels like it's tied to a broader push for authenticity and accountability. By leaning into Diana's long-lasting effect, the monarchy appears to be recognizing the traits that made her beloved all around the world: compassion, warmth of connection, and service. Those aren't just sentimental words, they read like a direction. Whether you see it as a symbolic correction or a historic turning point, Diana's restored place alongside Queen Elizabeth sends a strong message. It doesn't just treat her as a cherished royal figure, it positions her as one of the defining drivers behind the modern monarchy, so that her legacy keeps shaping what comes next. Princess Anne and Prince William's calculated yet deeply personal action restored Diana to where she always belonged, bringing an end to decades of perceived erasure. This quiet reckoning reveals how resilience, loyalty, and justice can still reshape even the most traditional institutions. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more revealing journeys behind palace doors, and continue to the next video on your screen, where another royal secret is waiting to be uncovered.